Hi, everyone. Welcome once again to Restitch America. Thank you so much for joining us today. And today we have a special treat for you. We have a friend of mine from social media who has created a platform for herself, which I've really loved and been really excited to bring her to you. And her name is Abigail Lee. And you may know her on social media as Party of Logic. And so she's on TikTok and other social media platforms. Thank you, Abigail, for that. And to give you some background, Abigail was a devoted liberal or Democrat her entire life. And then around the 2016 election, she even caucused for Hillary Clinton. And then after Trump was elected, she believed the United States, as we know it, would no longer exist. And then 2 years later, she realized that our country wasn't in ruin. And in fact, the exact opposite was occurring. So not only was the country doing well, but her family and her businesses were also prospering. And this was the first catalyst that inspired Abigail to look around and see how powerful the influence of the media was in perpetuating and manipulating her perspective. So her eyes were opened and her vision gradually became more clear. And by the time COVID came around, her mind was completely open and awake. So we're going to welcome to our studio, Abigail Lee. Abigail,
Hey,
welcome.
good morning. Thank you. I sent this message to you. I'm not awake usually at this point of the day. So I would only do this for so many people, and you're one of them. So you must be an early bird.
I am. My alarm usually goes off at 5 a.m. And for the past, I would say, couple of years, I've always beaten my alarm. So I'm always up before the alarm goes off.
I'm so
So
impressed. So I'm at my office right now, and next door to me, my office is located downtown in the town that we live in. Next door to me is a gym, a boxing gym, but it's also just like a gym where people work out in. And I'm always impressed when I'm here this early that there's so many people out working out, and they do this every day. And I am just in awe of these people.
that is cool. Yeah. So originally, my kind of waking up early story is growing up in Ghana, which is in West Africa. And so growing up, we always woke up in my house at 4 a.m. to get chores done. We had to do a lot of chores in the morning before going to school. So 4 a.m. we woke up and then we got the chores done. And then also I went to boarding school for 3 years. And so in boarding school, the alarm clock or the school wake up time officially was 4:45 a.m. So my body is synchronized to that time. And so I always wake up at that time
Your
nowadays.
internal clock.
So Abigail, this is your chance to kind of let us know a little more about you. And so I'm going to start with a couple of icebreaker questions.
Okay.
Okay. So first question to you is, what is the best compliment you've ever gotten?
So I'm a lot of things. We talk about right now, it's really big to identify people. I'm a lot of things. And one of the things I am most proud of is being a mother. And I certainly don't think I'm always doing everything right. I'm sure there's lots of things my kids are going to go to therapy for later. I don't know. But we do have a lot of fun in our family. And one of my daughter's college friends had to interview some parents for a psychology class she was taking, and she had asked me a few questions, and then my daughter was sitting there, and I said to her, what's something that you would do differently as a parent than how you were raised? And she's a typical mom-daughter relationship where we didn't always, there was a little bit of conflict, probably especially in high school, so I wasn't sure what she was going to say. We get along really well, but she thought for a little bit, and she said, there's not one thing I would change. I would want to raise my kids exactly like you did. And honestly, I had to hold back a little. Like, I don't think she realized like how much that meant, because as a parent, you always have this mom guilt, or you feel like you're not doing everything right. And for her to have this safe opportunity in a place where she could say whatever she wanted, I wasn't going to get upset. That was a huge compliment.
That's awesome. Let me um let me noodle on that a little bit, as they
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So you're a mom. How many kids do you have?
3. Yeah, I
Two
have
kids.
19 or a 20-year-old daughter, a 19-year-old son, and a 16-year-old son. And I've talked about this before on social media. I've always told my kids I want them to continue their education. What that looks like doesn't have to be the same for
Mhm.
everybody. And I went to a 4-year college and graduated. My husband did, but that's not for everybody. Whether they want to go to a community college, if they want to go to a trade school, I don't care what it is as long as they continue their education. And like I said, a college isn't for everybody. So my oldest went to a community college and graduated early, and she actually works as a bartender in the tourist season and makes more money than I did my first year teaching, because I used to be a teacher. And then she nannies in the off season. And then she's like, I don't know what I want to do, and I don't want to go to a 4-year college. And the thing that she struggles the most with is people will say, "What are you doing now?" And they expect her to say, "I'm going to a university now, I'm going to
Mhm.
continue my education." And it's not common anymore, which is a shame for people to just live their lives and go to the workforce. Because the crazy thing is, we need people, especially like in the service industry, for us to exist here, right? And then we get upset when there's not enough people working for our restaurant or a retail place to be open.
Mhm.
But we're encouraging kids to go to 4-year colleges, and it just doesn't make sense. And then my son is also, he's 19, he's going to the same community college. He's a dreamer, and he wants to be in the entertainment industry. So I don't know. We're in the middle of America. We're in Iowa. There's not a lot of opportunity for that.
Yeah.
So he does a lot of stuff locally. He writes music and writes scripts, and he's hoping to maybe go to California after the 2-year degree. And then my youngest is 16, and he's a junior in high school, and he's a pretty good athlete. So he's hoping to play college sports. So
That's
that's
cool.
my only one that'll go to a 4-year college, but that's because of he wants to be an engineer and he wants to play college sports, so that his future looks a little different. But yeah, I think we need to really push and encourage and educate kids in high school of all the different opportunities and other things that are out there that they can do than just go to a 4-year college.
I love that. So I actually have my oldest is 16, just turned 16 on Monday. And so we finally have a driver or a soon to be driver in our home. And he's also a junior in high school, and he plays football. And I mean, he has the size for it. I don't know where he got the size because I'm only 5'7", and his mom is not much taller. And so he he is about, I think, about 6'1", 6'2", and about 235 pounds. So he has the size for it.
What? So when you
And
take pictures and people are like, "What?"
who is this kid? I know.
Is it
And
hard to
so
discipline him when you're like looking up at him?
it's getting more difficult. And now he is like, he challenges me in every single way,
Well, that's
especially when we have, discussions about politics and things like that.
I
But
love that you do that though.
one of the things that you said that caught my eye was the fact that we have been working with him to try to understand what he wants to do, in college. And one thing he has said to us is he doesn't want to play football. He doesn't want to play football. And for me, after investing a lot of time and emotion into the sport with him ever since he was in middle school all the way till now, it feels a little kind of disappointing to hear him say, "This is not what I want to do in college," and and he's still trying to figure out what he wants to do ultimately. But he's a really smart kid, and it's hard for me as a parent because I'm seeing it kind of like, are you giving up? Are you quitting? Are you,
Mhm.
and it's I'm trying to kind of come to terms with his decision and his choice to do something a little different from what his parents did.
Well, because first you probably had a little bit of an image, not that it's your life, but
Mm-hmm.
you had kind of like, I thought this is what the future looks like. My daughter she was a competitive athlete, and at one point she quit soccer, and it was I put a lot of time and and I said to her, "But you're so good at it,"
I
and she goes, "Just
know.
because you're good at something doesn't mean you enjoy it."
That is
And
true.
it really was, I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm not gonna." And so she was a competitive figure skater in high school, and she's a natural athlete. I just had a conversation with my friends about this. This is her journey, and what was difficult as a parent is you want them to reach their full potential. You don't want them to have any regrets, but
Mm-hmm.
I also don't want something more than they want it. and she could have gone further and done figure skating on a higher level, and she could have gone like and done it as a career. But I wanted that, right? I thought that's something she could do, and I
Mhm.
can't. We always, my husband always say, we can't drive the bus. That you need to be the one driving the bus, and if that's not something you want to do, I'm not putting so much energy and time into that. But I do understand when you've done so much to this point. I can't even tell you, I have a lot of friends. We didn't do a lot of club sports, but I have a lot of friends that their kids did club sports, especially baseball. And their kids did it from like elementary, middle school, and then in the high school they get, I don't know, it's not, I don't know if it's burnt out, but and then their kids, they thought that they were going to be this, college athlete in the sport, and they're not. And it's got to be a little, not reeling, but okay, I got to readjust like my
Exactly.
mindset. Yeah.
It is a little emotional for me. And I have a 15-year-old as well who is excellent at many things, but she was into gymnastics as well. And she finally has come to the decision that, she wants to do other things. And so I think as a parent, one of the things I'm trying to do is that quitting, or is that making a conscious choice to
Right.
orient your life towards where you see yourself going over the next, haul. And so that's something that we're kind of adjusting to as parents. And I like the idea of allowing these children to kind of explore what is out there. Because if this land is the land of freedom, as we say, it's about time we give these kids some freedom to kind of explore what is out there, and maybe they will become the things that we didn't expect, but
Right.
also the things that make them happy. And then also because of that, it causes them to thrive than otherwise, going into something that we kind of push them into. So,
Yeah. I worry. So my youngest son, or not my youngest, my middle one, I think one thing holding him back is he's afraid to fail. So
hmm,
sometimes he doesn't do things because, so like with the entertainment industry, I'm like, you need to have a TikTok channel, you need to have a YouTube channel, you just put some of your music out there and do some like short stories. And he's afraid of the negative feedback he's going to get. And I'm like, well, then you're going to be in the wrong industry, because entertainment industry ain't pretty, and there's going to be a lot of rejection. And so I think there's a lot of kids who are afraid to fail. The other thing, when you talked about changing, one of my favorite, so we did this, we always take a summer trip as a family, and one year we just stayed in our state, but we did the top 10 things. We saw this internet, there's like a website that says the top 10 things or top 20 things to do in your state, and so we did a whole bunch of them, and we had everything set up of where we were going to stay and what we were going to do. Well, one night we went, it was like the only island in our state, and we went there and we were supposed to stay at a bread and breakfast, and the town was, I don't want to diss the town, but there was nothing to do. And my kids were younger at that stage, and we had to keep them. So anyway, we're like, you know what? Let's go to this other town that's south of here. And it was I don't know if people know American Pickers. There's
mhm,
it's a TV show, and the guy
yep.
that is on American Pickers had an antique show there, or has an antique store there. So we went there. I think it's LeClaire. I think that's what it's called. Anyway, and we went down, and it was the best part of our trip, and we stayed in an Airbnb on the Mississippi that used to be a captain's cabin, and we were right on the Mississippi. We had a fire that night. It was the best probably part of our entire trip, and it was the most unexpected, not planned. And the whole reason I bring this up is to talk about like, well, this is what we thought our kids were going to do. This was the plan, and now they're doing something different, which could be even better, an even better journey, a better adventure, a better future for them that we didn't even know existed. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So at the beginning of the introduction, we talked about who you were in terms of your politics just a few years ago, and I I've been privy to your transition. And I remember you a few months ago, you actually uploaded a video of yourself when you thought Hillary was going to win. And, and the journey from that point all the way to where you are today. Now, before we
yeah.
even go into the discussion of politics, one thing that I want to point out is that one of the reasons why I started the show was because I believed that, the media paints this picture of this divide in this country, that we're so divided that we can't even sit in the same room and have a conversation. But we just did. We may not necessarily be on the same side of the political aisle. We may
Right.
not agree on a lot of things, but we just had a constructive conversation about the things we have in common,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so this caricature that is created by the media around, political conversation, where basically the picture that is painted is that there is this huge divide that cannot be mended. I think we need to begin smashing those ideas so people can see that, yes, we may not vote the same way every time, we may not agree on everything, but there's always an opportunity and a chance to look for common ground and find ways to communicate and work with each other. So let's jump into your political journey and transformation. So describe kind of yourself back in 2008, or let's say 2016, Hillary time, and how you began that transition over to being more independent now.
Yeah. So I always thought I was a Democrat. My mom, and you've probably seen me talk about this, was a huge Democrat. She was the president of the State Board of Education for Iowa, and I have pictures of her with Barack Obama. I have pictures of her with Clinton. And so not that she tried to influence me, she really wanted all of her kids to have their own mind, but that's just, I always saw the liberals as being the party of tolerance and understanding and love and acceptance. So I thought that's me. That's 100% me. And I always thought that Republicans were staunch and just had no sense of humor and I really don't like the two-party system. I know there are more parties out there legally that you could vote for, like last election I think you could vote for Jorgensen for the independent, but I feel like I don't like that they're so divisive and then they're so different, because I actually see myself on both sides. There's things I agree with on the Liberal Party and there's things I agree with on the Conservative Party. So I do struggle with that now, but back then I thought I was a liberal. And my husband says that because him and I would have conversations and I'd say things and he's like, that's a conservative point of view. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not a liberal. And yeah, and I caucused for Hillary. But here's the problem with why I caucused for Hillary. I caucused for her because she was a woman. And I think that's one of the problems we have right now is identity politics. I really didn't care where she stood on things. I wanted a woman to be president. It's about time. And that's just not how I am anymore. I really do look at where people stand, and I don't vote straight party ticket. I don't know how people can, but I have no disrespect to the people who do. I picked who I think is best represents my point of view and my opinions now. I used to my husband hated this when I did this, because he's a history teacher, American history teacher, and it drove him nuts. He's very in the middle of the road. He would call himself a libertarian, and he always, whenever someone has a point of view, when you talk about, I think we talk about in one of your talk to your producer, we were talking about like critical thinking. He wants people to critical think in his class, and so when somebody has an opinion, he asks more questions. And it's not because he disagrees with them. He wants them to have, why do you think this? Let's make sure you have information and background to support your opinion. But I really didn't have that. I just voted for, this is what I say, I voted for women first. And then if there was minorities, I would vote for them. And then I would vote for Democrats. Like, it was ridiculous. I had nothing. And this is the problem though, right? We have a lot of, and I don't want to say uneducated as a diss on people, but that's the majority of Americans. I think if you ask them, well, why are you voting for this person? What are their policies on this? What's their opinion on this? They wouldn't be able to answer your question. So, so yeah, now I just do a lot more homework, and I don't let a political party sway me. I don't let the media sway me. I say this word a lot lately, gobsmacked. What's difficult now is I say I'm awake, not woke. That doesn't mean I don't agree with some of the liberal ideologies, but I am shocked at what I know and see now that my eyes are open. And I don't know how long it's been going on. Maybe it's going on since the beginning of media. I don't know. But as a human being, and this is nonpartisan, everybody should be upset with how the media is acting. I don't understand how more people, the reason why a lot of people are not upset is because the media is saying what they want them to say. And it shouldn't matter, because what if the media switches and now they're saying the opposite? You're going to be very upset about it. So it's just like in classrooms, not to get too controversial, but there's people who don't like that they're trying to censor a few things in the public schools. Well, what if they were saying things that you didn't like trying to push people into certain religions? You wouldn't like that. So we have to be very careful about not being okay with what the status quo and the narrative is, because you're okay with it. We should all be upset with the censoring, with the manipulation on every
Mhm.
it bothers me that it doesn't bother people. I thought as a liberal, you should want free speech. And I think one of the difficulties right now is people think hate speech is speech they don't like to hear. And
Mhm.
there is a huge difference between hate speech and just free speech. And I think, and maybe you can speak differently to this because you're a male and you're Black, but like when people say things like you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're transphobic, that's hate speech. When you say that to anything you don't like to hear, you're doing a disservice to those words, because when there is true racism and a true bigot, it doesn't get the attention it deserves because you've used that word so many times when it didn't apply, that now when there, I feel like when there needs to be, when that certain something needs to be called out, people are gonna be like, well, you call everything a
Exactly.
racist, so
I
big
know.
deal.
I know, and sometimes it pushes people to even actually embrace those labels
Mm,
because they're like, I don't care, I'm going to be called that anyway, so fine, yeah, right.
right,
And that's unfortunate. But one of the things you said that caught my attention was that you said that you thought you were a Democrat, right? And the key word there is you thought you were a Democrat. And so what that suggests to me is that whether we like it or not, we're kind of put into a box in terms of our political options without knowing it because of maybe the influences around us. And then that a lot of people don't break out of that box,
right,
right? In my case, I had the opportunity to come to America as a clean slate because I was 19 when I got here. I didn't have any knowledge of the political systems or ideologies. And so I was literally a clean slate, and so I had to evaluate the parties and the ideas individually. And I had to think about it and say, where do I fall on this idea or that idea? I didn't have the baggage that other people grow up
right,
with. And so a
right,
lot of people don't break out of that initial, set where,
right,
my parents are Democrats. We've always voted Democrat. I've gone to Democrat rallies and I'm kind of stuck in that box and I
right.
can't see myself doing anything else. And that's the challenge. How do we get people to begin to question? And so what would you say was, the thing that caused you to begin to question?
Yeah, so COVID definitely did, and how people acted then, but it happened. But it happened. That was when I was like, oh, okay, now I'm here. The gradual, I would say, and again, I am not. I hate when people say when you defend Trump, people call you a Trumper. I am. Listen, you said I am not. I don't like some of the stuff he says, some of the stuff he does. So let's make that clear. But what I don't like more is when I would watch Trump speak, like his entire. This is what. Well, this is when I was like, I would listen to his entire speech, and then I would hear what the media said he said, and I'm like, that. Listen, I'm not a Trumper, but that's not what he said. That is not what he meant. Again, like we talked about earlier, you took that out of context. You're hearing something he didn't say.
Are you actually
That
saying he didn't ask people to inject bleach into their bodies?
that's what exactly. That's one. That is 100%. That is one of them. The other one is when they were talking about forest fires. He talked about how, and I'm not quoting him directly, but how they need to clean up all the debris that's on the ground. And he's 100% right, because the media said, oh, well, we're supposed. They made fun of him, saying we're supposed to go out in the forest and rake. That's exactly what they ended up doing to prevent the forest fires. They went up and cleaned all the debris on the ground so there wouldn't be like kindling. So yeah, what again, like exactly how the bleach, that's exactly what happened. And I'm like, okay, listen, I don't always agree with what he said, but I don't like, I I was so surprised this whole thing in the last, I don't know what it is now, 4 or 5 years. I'm very disappointed in human beings, because I am a critical thinker. I want some time to think and see things from all sides. And the fact that people are like, no, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm like, wait, don't you want to control your own life? Don't you want do you want to be controlled? And I was so disappointed in one of my friends, and I said, why do I feel this way? Like, why are more people not? And I asked one of my friends who owns his own business, and I own my own business, and he said, listen, Ab, your brain works different. You are a risk taker. You are not afraid. You don't live in fear. There are a lot of people that will give up some freedom to feel safe. It doesn't mean they actually are safe. They will give up responsibility for their own life so they and somebody else take care of them, so they're not responsible. Like, well, I just did what you told me to do. Like, and I'm like, oh, I don't, that's not how my brain works and all at all. And I don't know why you'd want somebody else to control your life. But yeah, I was so disappointed with how many people were fine with giving up a little bit of their freedom or a little bit of their money to be controlled. And that just isn't, like, I have a sure this is not influenced. Like, listen, I am not, and I get everybody has different personalities. And there's something you said. I I think one of the biggest, like when you talk about you changed your point of view or you were a clean slate. I think for me, like I said before, I was the opposite. I thought the conservatives were staunch, and I think right now a lot of the conservatives, people, their image is that they think they're selfish. They only care about themselves, and they're rich and they want to keep their own money. How I see it now, and again, I don't call myself a Republican, but I think that I use that analogy, and maybe you've heard of it, where you feed a man a fish, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach him how to fish, you feed him for life. And I feel that's what the conservatives are trying to do. They're not doing handouts, they're doing hand ups. They want to show you how you can live on your own and not be dependent on the government for the rest of your life. And I don't know how that's a bad thing. It's not that Republicans are selfish. They do want to help you. They want to help you in a different way. And I think the liberals are really good at PR, and I think they're really good at like just like advertising and commercial. And I don't mean literally, I mean just like for their party, they're really good at the game, and the Republicans aren't. And I'm not saying they need to change, because I certainly don't want to change them, but there's so many things that I would love to give them. Like, I could talk to the head of the Republican Party, like, this is what you need to do. There's an image about you. And one of my favorite, and my husband said this years ago, and again, he's a libertarian. They needed to do a commercial, the Republican Party, of showing different people, not white old guys,
Mhm.
and say, I'm a Republican. And it could be somebody that you wouldn't even imagine would be a Republican, because people have this image of who they should be. And then someone's like, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative. And it just shows different walks of life. Because I think the other thing, when you talked about opening my eyes, one of the things that opened my eyes, and you've heard me say this before, is the liberals always say that they're the party of change. And I'm like that. I'm like, yeah, let's ruffle some feathers. Let's do something different. And then they put forward a white, old, rich dude that's been in politics for 40 years. And I'm like, how has that changed? He hasn't done anything in 40 years. He's been in DC for 40 years. He's a white, old, rich dude. He looks like a Republican. There were so many other great candidates, so many other great Democratic candidates that I would have voted for. And I might have still been in the Liberal Party if that had happened. But that really opened my eyes. I was like, why would you pick this guy? Didn't even get first or second in the beginning of all the caucusing. Why are we choosing him? And I was like, what is happening? What is going on? So
That's true. I like the fact that you said that the liberals have the PR machine, right? They have Hollywood, and they have all the producers and all the
you
filmmakers.
can't lose. Yeah.
I know, right? They have control over the narrative, and their PR is pretty good. And so the way I have explained it to people in the past is, it's almost like you are running against Santa Claus, and anyone who runs against Santa Claus will lose, because
Or
it's so much
puppies.
easier, right? It's so much easier to say to people, we will give you everything you want, and you don't have to take any responsibility for it. If you are drug addicted, we will give you the drugs. We'll give you a place where you can safely inject these drugs, and we will give you free homes, and we will do everything that you want. And if you want to live on the streets, hey, it's a right to live on the streets. You don't have to clear out. You can choose to live on the streets. If whatever it is you want to do, it doesn't matter, as long as it makes you happy, right? That's
Right.
all you need to do. And it doesn't matter if other people have to use their productivity to subsidize your behavior, right? And that's a much easier message to get out there. It's much easier to tell people they don't have to do anything. And
Right.
as a Christian, it's one of those things that I reject in the sense that sometimes in the Christian church, you hear people say things like, hey, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is make sure that, when push comes to shove and you're about to die, you can just say, I accept God, I accept Jesus, and immediately everything is okay. And you're like, really? Like, what about the repent part? What about the, love your neighbors? What about all these other things that are necessary to truly changing who you are and being like Jesus Christ, right? And so it's the same kind of idea that you can just do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. And when you need help, we will prevent you from suffering the consequences of the choices you made. Right. And then the guy comes into the room that says, sorry, no, you can't do everything that you want. Or if you do everything you want, it will lead to bad consequences. And we're not going to always save you from those consequences, because those consequences are lessons for you. And that guy looks like the mean guy, right? And that's how I see in general kind of the conservative side of the political aisle, is that they're the people who have to come and bring the reality into the conversation. And when you're talking to someone who is addicted to, I can do whatever I want, and you come and tell them, sorry, well, you can do this, but you're not going to get my help. I'm not going to
enable
give you the drugs to inject into your body. Like, I'm not
that whole
do
thing. I can't even grasp my head around how people support that whole, you're gonna do it, we're gonna make sure you do it safely. I'm like, whoa. Like, you said something really interesting about, I do think the Liberal Party are more dreamers and the Conservative Party is more reality. And I'm gonna not get the quote right, but there's something about for an eagle to fly, you need to have balance on both wings. And so it's okay to have reality, it's okay to be dreamer, and so then we can somehow meet in the middle. And I think that's what's missing right now is, I want you to be a dreamer, but we also need to okay, can we do this? How do we do this? And
exactly.
What I don't like is people want us all to be over here. And I'm like, well, then we're just going to go like this and fall. I don't understand. I like looking at different things, different ways. How could we do this? How can we improve this? But there has to be a realistic way to do that. And so I don't understand how we can work together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand the opposing part of that. I had written this down because you had said something earlier. I love having conversations with people that think different than me. Before I was a liberal, and I still do now, I have friends that are, all over the political spectrum, but I had a lot of friends that were conservative or libertarians, and I would have conversations with them, especially about the Second Amendment, because I don't own guns. I fully support people to have them, but I just have never been around them. My dad was a hunter. They're just not been in our home. So I feel uncomfortable around them, not because I don't think people should have them. I just am not, I'm not educated about it. And so I should not own a gun because I don't know how to use one. So we would have conversations about that. And even though I'm listening and I'm being receptive and respectful, it doesn't mean I agree with what you're saying. I might be like, oh, I've never thought of it that way. And I enjoy listening to people's from different walks of life, their different perspectives, their life experiences of how they got there. And I feel like, and I cannot put this, this is very important, that is what's missing. People are surrounding themselves in an echo chamber of people who think exactly like them. And you're not even capable of having a respectful conversation with somebody who thinks differently than you. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's what I think is one of the best things about life, is surrounding yourselves with people who think differently, because it's interesting. It's boring to be around people who think exactly like you. I don't understand that, and it's dangerous. I think it's extremely dangerous.
It is very dangerous. So a couple of months ago, I was thinking about this analogy and I made a post on social media around it, which is that if you were going on a trip, so let's say it's a trip to go discover something, and you have to put a team together. Are you going to say, I'm just looking for everybody who agrees with exactly what I'm going to say, and we're going to survive on this trip together? Or are you going to pick a team that is diverse in experience, that is diverse in talent, that is diverse in the way they think and analyze problems and solve problems? Which team will have a greater chance of surviving? And today, just like you're saying, a lot of people are saying, hey, if I'm only surrounded by the people who agree with me, then somehow we're stronger. But you are only stronger in that particular agreement. and you're weak in every other way.
Right.
And so a lot of these people get out into the real world and they can't hack it. They can't figure things out. And so you have this proliferation of mental illness, I think, a lot with depression and anxiety, and people who are not able to cope with real life because they've never been challenged in real life, right? We've created this bubble around people where their ideas are not challenged, and you get to a point where you can't cope in life because not everybody's going to cater to you. And we have these kids who hit that reality and can't handle it. And so you have, challenges with suicide, you have challenges with all sorts of these things that are happening to our children because many of them have not been able to learn how to live and thrive even when things are not going your way. Right.
No, I agree. So the first thing you said about having different perspectives, I think right now is dangerous is people think diversity is when we all look different. To me, I think diversity in thought is a lot more important than how we all look different, because I actually might look like exactly like somebody else who's white and blonde, but we have a totally different perspective and a different way of life. And I think that's almost more important than how we look, I think. And then the second thing is, it's interesting you said that, because a couple of days ago, talking about people not being challenged, I had a friend and I'm like, you always seem to handle stress so well. Like, you never complain to me. I always feel like I'm complaining to you. Like, who do you talk to? And she goes, I really don't. I'm like, how do you deal with stress so well? And she's like, my life was really hard growing up. I was 6 years old going to the grocery store for my family because, anyway, she told me everything. And I had known a little bit of her childhood, but she's like, so this is nothing. I had to go through a lot as a child. And I think that's what's happening right now is we are, and listen, I'm sure I've done this a little bit to my kids, but I've seen, so it used to be called a helicopter parent, but now I feel like it's called a lawnmower parent, where you mow down any problem there is for your kids so everything is smooth and a great path for them. That is not good. That you're actually doing a disservice to your children. Like, I remember my son was, long story short, was working at a grocery store and he wasn't putting in his time schedule. And so then he got scheduled for a time that we were going to be out of town. And I'm like, you need to call. And he wasn't calling. I'm like, you've got to call because we're not going to be here and you're going to get in trouble. And he wasn't calling. Other parents would have called the boss and said, hey. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So we were running errands and I pulled into the parking lot and he's like, what are we doing here? And I go, you're going in and talking to your boss about your schedule. And he looked at me and I go, go. And he opens the door and he looks back at me and he goes, this is out of my comfort zone. And he slammed the door. And I'm like, exactly. We are not allowing people to get out of their comfort zone enough to be challenged. And it's, again, you feel like you're doing what's best for your kid, but you're actually not, by solving all their problems and them not having to go through. Now, listen, there's a difference between like actual trauma. I'm not talking about that, but like they need to know so they have coping mechanisms when worse things happen to them in life. I asked my daughter, she went through a lot of stuff her freshman year in high school. And a couple of years later, when she had time to like process it all, I said to her, do you regret what happened? And she paused and she said, no, because I don't think I'd be the person I am today if that hadn't happened. And she is one strong woman. Like, she has gone through a lot and she's one of the strongest girls who's so confident in herself. And I think it's because she went through some major crap. And I was there, I supported her, but I didn't solve all her problems for her. She had to do that. And another thing you said, I'm sure I'm saying a lot that you could address, but we haven't said the word, but you've said it in a roundabout way, accountability. People think that they can do whatever they want without accountability because they have been able to do a lot without accountability. And I think that's one of the major things that is missing right now is people are not being held accountable for their actions. And that's a huge problem.
That's exactly how I would phrase it, right? It's this idea that we have freedom, and that's a good thing. Freedom is a virtue. We want people to have freedom, but with freedom comes the consequences of that freedom. And what I see is happening a lot, and it's especially, I would say, on the left side of the aisle, is this idea of embracing freedom, but then wanting to create a society that prevents people from the consequences of the freedom that they've embraced. Right. And so, for instance, you would say, well, you can do whatever you want in this particular arena, but then when you fail and you the consequences come due, then we have to have a government program that pays for your failure so that you don't suffer that consequence, right? And then some right winger comes along and says, no, let's cut that government program. And then they're painted as this is the person who doesn't want to help people who are suffering.
Right.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so I've always thought that, and that was one of the things that I noticed as a new person in the country. I felt like being conservative was much more difficult because you had to have the adult conversations where it's like it's not all pies in the sky. We have to figure out where the rubber meets the road and how to actually make things work. We can't live in this fantasy of, oh, we have unlimited money, we can always print money, we can always pay for things. And I'm like, nobody lives like that in their real life. And if they try to live like that in real life, you find yourself in shambles. And so one question as we head closer to,
I know we've kind of gone
I know this
off. I
conversation
know
has
you
been a
had
lot of fun.
some questions. Yeah.
But I wanted to know your thoughts on recently on the Democrat side. They've decided to move the presidential election primaries, I believe, move it from Iowa, where you are, to, I believe, South Carolina. And because they want to give, I don't know if you would say this is lip service or this is an actual thing that they want to do to give more weight to the voices of, African Americans in the choosing of who becomes the nominee for the Democrats. Have you thought about that at all? And
yeah. So first of all, we have a lot of Blacks, so I don't know why. Obviously, probably demographically wise, I'm sure South Carolina has more. But I always find it funny because some of my friends would be like, "Are there even any Black?" I go, "Do you think there's border control on the Iowa? Like, we have a lot of diversity, okay?" But honestly, two things: we really messed up the last caucus, okay? Like, I don't know if you remember, but like the results took like weeks. Yeah. And I was like, this is mortifying. This is embarrassing. Like at this point, if we did it manually, we'd be done by now. I don't know what happened. I'm not part of that. I had, obviously been part of the caucus in my town, but I was like, this is so embarrassing. Now, growing up, it was great to be that state where it started because I met a lot of presidents, right? I had a lot of opportunity to meet candidates. So a lot of politicians, which I'm not saying all politicians are great, but it was a great opportunity to meet. They would be in all our parades. They would come and have these speaking events. But now as an adult, I'm fine with it not being here because I got to tell you, the commercials, the billboards, the mailings, I was like, enough. I wanted to not see it. Like, it's almost like when I now watch TV, as soon as I see anybody talk about politics or they woke or whatever you want to call it, I'm like, I'm changing the channel. When I relax, I don't want to talk. I don't want to think about that. It's already in my life already. So we were inundated with just in all areas of my life with politics during that time. And so I'm fine with it not being here. And I think it's good. And again, I think it should go to different places. I almost think it should go to different places all the time.
It should rotate.
It should get
right.
Yeah. I don't even know how it happened that we have. I'm sure there's somebody who could probably tell us, but I'm fine with it moving around even. Like, again, I'm all about like, let's see things from all different sides. Like, that's fine. Somebody can do it better or different. Cool. Everybody gives some opportunities to other people. So yeah,
I love that. I love that perspective because a lot of things in politics only occur because that's just how it's always been, right? And people don't challenge the status quo. How many times do you hear of people who are, supposed to be the mavericks and they're going to be the ones who go and change everything, and they get to Washington and they become everybody else, right? And when the time comes for them to actually stand up to the swamp, they end up just picking their own perch in the swamp. And so I'm glad that people are thinking out of the box. And one of the things that I enjoy is the fact that I think and if you asked me this, I would say this is one of my thoughts around the differences between the two parties. I would say on the left, for the most part, they invest their energy in the potential solution or what their goals are rather than the actual thing that happens because of their policy. So they say, well, let's spend money on this because the goal is to curb poverty. The goal is worthy. The goal is the thing that we're focused on. And then we come to the other side and we say, but did it actually work? You spent $14 trillion and nothing has changed. So maybe focusing too much on the goal is not necessarily, maybe the thing that works may not be so glamorous, but it works, right?
Right.
And so we go chasing these lofty goals, you know, climate change. Let's solve climate. Let's change the weather, right? Let's go change the weather rather than saying, oh, maybe we need to adapt. Maybe we need to encourage more innovation. Maybe we need to figure out how to build better so that, you know, even people who live close to the water can still survive. Rather than doing that hard work, we say, no, let's go change the weather, right? And we spend billions of dollars and the weather continues to stay the way it is, right? Or go ahead.
So it's so funny that you actually brought up climate change, because I actually thought of that as towards the end. I was thinking of that because, again, one of the reasons I thought I was a liberal is I was huge granola, like reduce, reduce, recycle, and I still do. But I started to do homework on like the electric car. And from birth to death, an electric car is no better than a gas car. There's the mining for the lithium batteries, what you do with the lithium batteries afterwards, and you have to get electricity somehow. I just think it's, and so I started to, again, this whole, and I'm not saying that climate change isn't a thing, is things that we could do for our environment. 100% there's things that we can do for our world. I totally, I'm with that. But some of the stuff we've been sold is actually BS, like 100%. I'm from Iowa, so we have a lot of these windmills. Like, I don't know if you've seen them, but they're enormous. And I loved them at first because I thought, yeah, let's use wind energy. Like, this is free stuff. Well, first of all, it has polluted our entire environment. Every time I go out in the country, all I see is windmills. And I'm like, that's so sad. Like, it used to be one of my favorite things in Iowa is that you go and just see the countryside, and now there's these huge windmills. Well, come to find out, they actually do they kill thousands of birds every year. They have these vibrations where it affects the wildlife for miles and miles around. And then they use tons of oil, like a ridiculous amount of oil, which I thought, I was like, wait a second, this is green energy. I thought, why do we need oil? And then they have nothing to do with the waste. Once the windmills, they can no longer use it, they have it just gets buried. There's graveyards full of windmills. So I started again with my journey, starting to do my own homework. And that was one of the things, was climate change. And, when I was in college, Clinton and Gore came to speak at my college, and I met both of them. I mean, I shook both of their hands. And Gore is huge on all of this. And he said back then, our country, our world would no longer exist at this point. Guess what? Like, you have to, I think I'm really, like I said in the beginning, I'm just really disappointed in the lack of critical thinking and just eating whatever the mass tells you. And that is super disappointing to me as a human being and as an American, is where we promote free thought and free thinking and free speech, and you don't do that.
Yeah, the way I call it is the outsourcing of your brain to a think tank, right? Literally, people are outsourcing their thinking to other people, and they literally, I'm going to write an article on this. I call it a conspiracy without actually conspiring. People are so bought in to certain ideologies that they don't have to be in the same room to conspire. They just are on the same page somehow with everything that comes out. And you see this huge amount of groupthink, even though people are living thousands of miles apart, but they think exactly the same way. So when you are thinking, for instance, about COVID policy and how it was implemented in various places, you saw this huge swell of groupthink around the people who were so alarmist about it, right? And how they wanted things to be. And so you could find the typical, COVID, Democrat in California compared to the one in New York, and they were the exact same person, even though they'd never met. And somehow there's this conformity around these ideologies that it just has such a huge hold on people. And so the only thing I can explain it as is they have outsourced their thinking to a third party, and that third party almost like downloads the information into their brains, and then people just go along as drones doing exactly what they're told.
Yeah,
And
and I know that we're getting towards the hour, but there's another thing. I have a whole list of stuff we could probably talk about
go
another
ahead.
time. But one of them is what you talked about is outsourcing. The other problem I think is there's people have if we don't have something that's true, that's the truth, then we have nothing. If we can't all agree that this is true and this is true. Now we may not agree with it or we may not like it, but if we can't have some infinite truths, then we're in trouble. Like if then nothing is true.
There's a
Then
song by Katy Perry that says, and this is something that caught my eye in that lyric where it says, "If you stand for nothing, you will fall for everything."
everything.
Right, and that's a
Haven't you
really
seen
true thing.
oh my in Hamilton, they say that to the protagonist, if we don't know what you stand for, what will you fall for?
Exactly. And so it's important for people to realize that, there are immutable things about life. And
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of things, a lot of the challenges you see people going through are just programmatically the direct results of the choices that you make. And so you can choose your choices, you can't choose your consequences. Those consequences are tied to the choices almost by an eternal law. And
Right.
so if you jump, you're going to come down, right? It's a law, and you can't unless you can
But some
figure
people will
out.
be like, well, no, I don't know. And I'm like, oh my
Well, we
gosh.
just need government to put a cushion on the ground. So
Right.
when you
Right.
jump off the building, there has to be a safety net to actually
Right.
hold you up. And there's nothing
Right.
wrong with safety nets, but the fear, and this is what I would like to end on, is that the safety net can become a fishing net that traps the people who fall into it.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Right.
is what we have to be aware of, is not to turn those safety nets into fishing nets, whether it's
Right.
intellectually, whether it's just on people and how they live their lives, about fiscal responsibility, all those things that we disagree on as political parties. For the most part, it's the balancing of the safety net fishing net
Right.
allegory, right?
Right.
If
It's a
we
trap. Yeah.
Exactly, it can be a safety net to save you, or it can trap you
Right.
into
And you
a
don't
state
even
of
know it.
mediocrity and a state where you can't progress in life.
Right.
So this has been a really awesome conversation. And so one last thing I'll ask you to wrap this up is, our podcast is to Restitch America. So what would be your advice about people who feel like, because every now and then I post a video and people are like, we can't unite with these people, they're so far out there. I'm like, yeah, there's still things that we can connect on. So what is your advice to people who are feeling like, we're so divided, there's no chance of bringing us back together, even though we may disagree on a few things?
Yeah, I think that it's important to, like we talked about, not be in your bubble and only surround yourself. I get the comfort in that. I understand that, but I would challenge people to go do things that they wouldn't regularly do or talk to people they wouldn't regularly talk with. We need to go back to having respectful conversations with people. I think that the majority of Americans are somewhere in the middle. I think there are extreme leftists and extreme rightists, but I do think the majority of people can see things differently. We're just a little afraid to talk about it and use our voice because of the cancellation on either side. But I would encourage people to keep talking, use their voice, because I think a lot of people, especially on the conservative side, are afraid to talk because they're afraid of the repercussions. But I am seeing, and I don't know if you have on TikTok, more people using their voice because they've had enough. Like, okay, I finally got my tipping point, and now, although I might have some repercussions, or might be some, I have my free speech, but something may happen because of it. I would just tell people to use their voice respectfully, which I know can be hard. And honestly, the best thing when somebody is so counterproductive and you can see that conversation isn't going anywhere, to not reach to go like this. Like you have a great demeanor. Like honestly, I think that because they want that, right? If you have
Exactly.
somebody, whoever that is in your life, or whatever you're talking about, if they're going like this, they want you to match it. That's something, they get something out of that. If you don't, that's actually really frustrating for people. Like for example, when I'm driving and somebody flips me off, I wave at them because and they're always like, oh,
Exactly.
what's
They
happening?
want the escalation.
Exactly.
I
So
know.
I have a question. I always ask this to people who aren't originally from here. What is your favorite part of America? What's your favorite thing about it?
Okay, now the interviewee interviewing the interviewer.
Yeah.
um, my favorite part of America. I think for me, when people have asked me that question, the thought that comes to my mind is that I feel like my mind is free. And what I mean by that is, in Ghana, a lot of times I had to censor my mind. And what that means for me is that when you thought about something that you wanted to do, you always had to ask yourself, is this possible here? Is this possible? Can I do this? Is this wishful thinking? Right? In America, I don't have to do that. I could think about the most interesting, outrageous, difficult thing that I wanted to do, and there was nothing structurally that would stop me from attempting to do it.
But do you feel in the last couple of years that is not as clear?
I think on an individual level, for most people like me, it's you don't see, I don't have those restraints. So when we look at the country as a whole, you see these patterns that are troubling. But when you go into your own life, for the most part, you still have that autonomy and that freedom to be able to pursue whatever thing you want to do.
Right.
It's only when you start thinking about the entire country as a whole that sometimes you recognize that, okay, there are some people who are not able to do this or that, or there are these, in some cases, increasingly structural difficulties to actually getting certain things done. But in my personal life, I mean, there hasn't been anything so far that I've wanted to do that I felt like, something was stopping me from doing.
Except for probably censoring some of the things you might say on social
That
media.
that is probably true, because I have to have I've become very strategic about how I speak. And the goal is, one, to avoid the censors, but also to make sure that I cannot be misunderstood or potentially taken out of context. So I try to choose
which is
my words
hard to do right now.
very
People,
hard to do.
yeah, you're like, that's
Very
not
hard to
what I
do. I
meant.
know there are nefarious people out there who
Yeah.
would twist what you want to say, but I think, yeah, I try to walk that line very clearly to make sure that I think about everything I put out there, and make sure that it's clear for people to understand. And I also have taken this strategy of not attacking people or targeting individuals. My goal has always been to talk about principles and talk about values and talk about systems rather than people, because once you get into the people talking, that's when usually they come for you.
Right. Somebody had said this, and I think this is perfect. When I'm misunderstood or taken out of context, the line is, you're hearing something I'm not saying. Like, you're putting in other things because of how you feel of who I am or what you think I'm saying. You're hearing something that I'm not saying. And I think that happens a lot right now.
That is happening a lot. Abigail, it's been a pleasure to have you. I'm really glad I reached out to you and you responded.
Me
Not everybody
too.
responds.
Oh, really? Oh,
So
yeah. No, again, we have to have conversations. We have to show people that things may not exactly be what you perceive. We are
exactly.
human beings. We all come from a different place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us. I would love to have you sometime.
Absolutely.
So another time. And so thanks everyone for listening to our episode of Restitch America this week. And one thing I would like you to do, Abigail, is to let people know, where can they find you if they want to follow.
Yeah, so most of the stuff I do is on TikTok, and I've had to change my account a few times. So if you go to Party is Here, I believe is what mine is now. It used to be just Party of Logic, or Party of Logic is here. I used to be Party of Logic Here to Stay, Party Logic. But if you type in Party of Logic, you should be able to find it. And then I do go on Twitter. I wasn't really big on it until Elon Musk took over, and then I went on, and it's a lot more interesting. And I do have a few other ones like GETTR and Telegram. I'm just not on it very often, but if that's where people want to find me, they certainly can. And I'll try to post a little bit more in there. But yeah.
All right, we'll take all your contact information and put it in the description of the video so people can know how to reach you. Thank you once again for coming. And
absolutely.
We hope to
Thanks
see
for
you
the
again
invite
in the future.
Yeah.
All right. I like that. Party of logic.
My kids do that to me when I say goodbye. They're like, party of logic.
All right. We'll see you then.
All right. Thanks.